Hey guys, Angelo here from Team Spider. Today I'm just going to go over how to do a couple things. Here, I'll list them off for you. Today we're going to learn how to scale objects, move and move along axes. We know how to duplicate objects, zoom in on objects, rotate on axes. We're going to do a little bit in edit mode, and we're going to know how to add objects. So let's get started by opening up Blender. I'm using 2.63a, which is just a patched build, or 2.65a, sorry. When you open up Blender, this is basically what you get. Really quickly, let's go down here and explain a couple things. Here's what layer we're currently viewing, and that's darkened in. The little orange dot means there's an item on that layer, so if we click layer 2, 3, 4, or any of these other layers up to 10, if they don't have the yellow dot or orange dot, there is an item on it. There is not an item on it. Couple things here. There's wireframe. We're currently in solid view mode, and then there's textured, which you're going to get onto later. And then here we can go from object to edit mode, sculpt, vertex paint, all this stuff. We're really going to only want to know today object and edit mode. And then up here we're going to see some of that later. So in the previous tutorials, I taught you guys how to move around in 3D space using arrow keys and numpad, all this stuff. Today we're going to learn how to move the actual item. The first on the list is actually moving. So there's a couple ways to do this. If you really don't like using the keyboard, you can merely just click one of these little arrows. Green is Y, blue is Z, and red is X. Those are axes. There's always 3 axes in 3D space. Obviously, if you're working with 2D space, it's usually a Z or X and a Y axis, but this is 3D space, of course. So you can do that, select any one of these and move it back and forth. But obviously that gets tedious. If I want the block like right up here, I have to move here, and I have to move here, and I have to move here. So that gets a little boring. Another thing you can do is you can hit G, and that basically did it in an eighth of the time. Little pointer with grabbing or hitting G is sometimes looks good. It's like, oh, that's at the right corner here. When you turn, it's like, oh, it's also floating into there, and it's actually not anywhere near the corner. So sometimes you got to be careful with that. It's best to change to a certain view by going 1, 3, or 7 on the numpad. Let me quickly cast keys in case you didn't get much of this. Okay, so that's moving. And then hitting G can be specific. It's kind of like grabbing one of these. If I hit G, I can hit X, Z, or Y. And that just moves it along the axis that I have indicated. So that's good if you like using the mouse and the keyboard, which I do a lot. Another thing is scaling. It's pretty simple. Just hitting S, moving closer or further away from. One thing I forgot to mention is holding control on any of these movements, whether it's grabbing or scaling, will actually scale it to scales it by block. You can also do it by going down here and doing snap during transform. And as you see, it kind of jitters from box to box. That way you don't get something like this where it's just a little off. Another thing you gotta know, let's say you made something that's really good, like, made a really nice block or something, and you want this exact block. Unfortunately, Control C and Control V don't work. Took me a while to figure this out. It's Shift D, and you duplicate the object. And this is still in duplicated mode, so if I X, Y, or Z, it'll go along that axis, and you can hit numbers. So if I'm on the Z axis, I hit G and Z, I hit 1, I hit 5, it'll move it that many blocks along that axis. If I just hit G and do some random numbers, sometimes it gets a little off. Okay, another thing we want to know is how to rotate. That's pretty simple, just hit R, You can either hit Z, X, or Y like we did before, and it'll move along that axis. Now we're going to go into edit mode. We can either go down here, click, and go to edit mode, or you just hit tab, which is a lot faster, obviously. Like selecting objects, it's right click to select more than one vertex. These are the little black dots or points. You hit shift and you can select those. Another thing you can do is hit B and it'll be area select, or C and it's kind of like painting on what you're selecting. But in edit mode, it's the same as in object mode. You can hit G along axes if you need to. You can scale up and down. You can duplicate those a lot of times. It's probably not what you want to do. And you can, we'll get to that later. You can add objects, but do that later. Back into object mode, we can add objects. And something you want to know when you're adding objects is about your 3D cursor, which is right here. Hitting N, finding 3D cursor will give you the location of the actual 3D cursor. And as you see, when I move this, it moves 3D cursor. So we're really gonna, excuse me, we're gonna quickly change to 0, 0, 0. That's at the point of origin there. So why we need to know this is because when you hit Shift A to add an object or add up here, and you add a cube, the origin of the cube is going to be on the 3D cursor. Obviously, after you can move it, but if my 3D cursor is out here and I add a cube, it's going to be up there. Sometimes it's not exactly what you want, especially if the location of the 3D cursor isn't exact. It's like 5.284, whatever. You may not want that. So just hitting N and setting all these values to 0 really does work. You can, in edit mode, add objects. So when you go out of edit mode into object mode, that is one single object. And it's sometimes a little harder to work with. But you can hit P while in edit mode and do by loose parts, which is separating it by loose parts, and it separates it into 2 objects. That's all I have today. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you like it. This is Angelo from Team Spider.